The dust on Velcris Prime never settled. It hung in the air like fog, making everything look like a dream. Daewon wiped his goggles for the third time that hour, and went back to brushing dirt from ancient stones. He had been doing this for 3 years now, and sometimes he wondered if he would die here still brushing. Around him, the excavation site buzzed with activity. Beings from 12 different species worked under the harsh purple sun. There were the tall Vrelians with their 4 arms, the insect-like Chirruk clicking as they worked, and the floating luminary that glowed softly in the shadows. Daewon was one of only 5 humans on the entire planet. He didn't mind being the minority. Humans were always the minority out here. They had joined the Galactic Council only 200 years ago, which made them the newest members. The babies of the galaxy, some aliens called them. Not to their faces, of course, but Daewon had heard the whispers. "Human, you are slow today," a voice rumbled above him. Daewon looked up to see Tokamara, the Vrelian director of the excavation. Her skin was deep blue, and her 4 eyes never blinked at the same time. It was unsettling. "Just being careful," Daewon replied. "These stones are 15 million years old." Yes, the precursors." Tokamara waved one of her hands dismissively. "You humans are always so emotional about old things. They are just rocks." Daewon bit back a response. To him, they weren't just rocks. The precursors had built an empire that spanned galaxies when the current species were still swimming in oceans or hadn't even evolved yet. Then they vanished without a trace. No bodies, no records of what happened, just ruins scattered across thousands of worlds. And now, after 3 years of digging, they had found something big. The sepulchre rose from the ground like a black tooth. It was massive, easily 50 meters tall, made of some obsidian material that seemed to swallow light. Every scanning device they pointed at it simply stopped working. Cameras malfunctioned, drones crashed, and anyone who touched it fell down screaming. 7 people had died trying to open it. 2 Vrelians, 3 Chirruk, 1 Luminari, and a Korlati engineer. Their neural systems had simply burned out the moment they made contact with the surface. After the 7th death, the Galactic Council had sent new orders. No one touches the sepulchre. Just study it from a distance. Document it. Eventually, they would send specialists with better equipment. But that had been 3 months ago, and Daewon was tired of waiting. He finished his shift as the purple sun began to set. The other workers headed back to the main camp, a cluster of prefabricated buildings 2 kilometers away. Daewon watched them go, then looked back at the sepulchre. It stood alone in the excavation pit, surrounded by warning beacons that blinked red in the growing darkness. The security drones had been pulled back to the camp perimeter after one too many malfunctions. No one wanted to waste more equipment on the cursed thing. Daewon knew he shouldn't. Every bit of training, every safety protocol, every logical thought in his head told him to walk away. But something about the sepulchre called to him. It had been calling for months now, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. Like a word on the tip of his tongue or a song he almost remembered. He waited until full darkness fell. Then he climbed down into the excavation pit. Up close, the sepulchre was even more impressive. The surface was perfectly smooth, not a single scratch or mark despite sitting buried for millions of years. Daewon pulled off his glove and reached out slowly. His fingertips touched the cold surface. Nothing happened for a heartbeat. Then the world exploded with light. Golden symbols blazed across the black surface, flowing like water, forming patterns that hurt to look at. Daewon tried to pull his hand away but couldn't move. The symbols rearranged themselves, shifting, changing, and then they formed words, Korean words. "Welcome home, human." Daewon's breath caught in his throat. The language of his ancestors, written in technology 15 million years old. It wasn't possible. Korea hadn't even existed 15 million years ago. Humans had barely been recognizable as a species back then. The surface of the sepulchre rippled like water and split open. A doorway formed where none had existed before, revealing a corridor of pure white light. Daewon's hand came free, and he stumbled backward, but the doorway remained open. "This is insane," he whispered to himself. But his feet were already moving forward. The corridor was short, maybe 20 meters, and it opened into a chamber that should not have fit inside the sepulchre. It was vast, easily the size of a stadium, with a domed ceiling that showed stars that weren't in the sky above Velcris Prime. In the center of the chamber, floating 3 meters off the ground, was a sphere. It was beautiful, crystal or glass about a meter across, and filled with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Colors swirled inside it, blues and golds and colors Day One didn't have names for. He walked toward it as if in a dream. The sphere pulsed faster as he approached, the light growing brighter. When he stood directly beneath it, the sphere descended until it was level with his face. "Hello?" Day One said, feeling foolish. "But what else do you say to a 15-million-year-old artifact?" the sphere responded. A beam of light shot out and touched his forehead. Day One gasped as information poured into his mind. Not words or images, but pure knowledge, raw and overwhelming. He saw stars being born and dying. He saw worlds covered in cities that stretched across continents. He saw beings that looked human building impossible things. He saw Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This Earth was surrounded by rings of metal, orbital structures so large they dwarfed moons. And the people on it, they were human, but they were so much more. They had conquered death, mastered matter, bent reality itself to their will. And then he saw them make a choice. A terrible, beautiful choice. They unmade themselves. They gave up their power, reduced themselves to primitives, and scattered their genetic code across the galaxy. They seeded worlds with life, engineered it, shaped it, then stepped back and let it grow. The vision ended. Day One collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The sphere rose back into the air and settled into a position floating just above his right shoulder. He understood now. The precursors hadn't vanished. They had transformed. They had become the ancestors of every species in the galaxy. The Varelians, the Trick, the Luminari, all of them carried modified human DNA. They were all human children, changed and adapted for different worlds. And the sepulchre had been waiting for an unmodified human to return and claim the inheritance left behind. "This is going to cause problems," Day One said to the sphere. It pulsed in what might have been agreement. He stood on shaking legs and made his way back to the entrance. The moment he stepped outside, alarms began blaring across the camp. Lights snapped on. He looked up and saw cameras pointed at him, security drones already moving his direction. Of course they had been monitoring the sepulchre. Of course they had seen everything. Day One raised his hands in surrender as the first vehicles raced toward him. The sphere stayed floating by his shoulder, pulsing with patient light. He tried to will it away, to make it go back inside, but it didn't respond. It had chosen him, and it wasn't leaving. By the time Tokamara arrived with a dozen armed guards, half the camp had gathered at the pit's edge. They stared down at him with expressions ranging from shock to fear to something that looked like rage. "What have you done?" Tokamara's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the silent crowd. Day One looked at the sphere, then back at the director. "I opened the door," he said simply. He didn't mention what he had learned. Not yet. But as he looked at the faces of all the different species surrounding him, he realized the truth would come out eventually. And when it did, everything would change. The sphere pulsed one more time, and Day One heard a whisper in his mind, in perfect Korean. "They are not ready, but they must be." A chill ran down his spine. Not ready for what? The guards moved in, to take him into custody. But the moment they got within 3 meters of the sphere, their weapons stopped working. Electronics died. Even their suits began to malfunction. They backed away quickly, fear replacing professionalism. The sphere, it seemed, would protect him whether he wanted it to or not. Tokamara called for a full lockdown of the site and ordered a message sent to the Galactic Council. Day One sat in the dust, guarded by soldiers who were too afraid to come close, and waited for his life to become infinitely more complicated. Above him, the stars of Velcris Prime began to fade as dawn approached. The sphere pulsed steadily, A second heartbeat, and Day One wondered what his ancestors had been thinking when they left this behind. Whatever was coming next, he suspected it would change the galaxy forever. Commander Hyo Jin arrived on Velcris Prime exactly 18 hours after Day One opened the sepulchre. She came in a fast attack ship with minimal crew and maximum firepower, which told Day One everything he needed to know about how seriously Earth was taking this. She was tall for a Korean woman, with short-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. When she walked into the detention building where they were keeping Day One, every guard snapped to attention. Even the Vrelian ones. Day One Park, she said, looking him over. The sphere still floated by his shoulder, pulsing gently. You've started an interstellar incident. I touched a wall, Day One replied. Technically, the wall started it. Hyojin's lips twitched. Almost a smile. The Galactic Council has issued an emergency session. They want you handed over for study. Tokmara has already claimed salvage rights to both you and your new friend there. She nodded at the sphere. I'm not salvage. No, you're not. That's why I'm here. Hyojin pulled out a datapad and showed him an official document with too many seals. Earth's diplomatic corps has invoked Article 7 of the membership charter. As a human citizen, you fall under human jurisdiction. We're taking you home. Tokmara appeared in the doorway, her forearms crossed. The human stays. The artifact was discovered on a council archaeological site. It belongs to the council. The artifact chose him, Hyojin said calmly, and it's been quite clear about not letting anyone else near. Or have you forgotten what happened to your guards? It was true. Every attempt to separate Day One from the sphere had failed. It wouldn't let anyone get close enough to put him in restraints or scanning equipment. 3 guards were in the medical bay with burned hands from trying. This is theft, Tokmara hissed. This is extraction of a citizen, Hyojin corrected. We can debate legality later. Right now we're leaving. She had brought her own security team, 4 Marines in full combat armor. They surrounded Day One and escorted him out of the building. The sphere followed, and any equipment in its path simply died. Lights, cameras, doors, everything. As they walked to Hyojin's ship, Day One saw the entire excavation team watching. Hundreds of aliens all staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Fear definitely, anger, and something else. Something that looked like betrayal. He wanted to explain, to tell them what he had learned, but Hyojin pulled him into the ship and sealed the hatch. The ship was called the Teguk, a name that meant balance. Day One found that ironic, given that nothing about this situation was balanced. Besides Hyojin and her Marines, there were 2 other people aboard. Dr. Borum, a xenobiologist with nervous hands and kind eyes, and Sergeant Tae Yang, a Marine who looked like he had been carved from stone. Welcome aboard, Borum said, offering a shaky smile. I've been studying the footage from the sepulchre. What you found is incredible. What he found is dangerous, Tae Yang cut in. He was looking at the sphere the way someone might look at a bomb. That thing killed 7 people before it decided to like him. It didn't kill them, Day One said quietly. It rejected them. There's a difference. Dead is dead, Tae Yang muttered. The ship broke orbit and jumped to faster than light speed. Day One was given a small cabin and told to rest. But rest was impossible. The moment he closed his eyes, the sphere began showing him things. Visions poured into his mind, clearer now than before. He saw Earth 15 million years in the past, but it wasn't the primitive world he expected. The planet was surrounded by massive structures, rings of cities floating in orbit. The moon had been hollowed out and turned into a factory. Mars was green, covered in forests and oceans, and the humans who lived there were gods. They didn't age. They didn't die unless they chose to. They could reshape matter with thought, travel between galaxies in heartbeats, and create life as easily as breathing. They had explored everything, conquered everything, understood everything, and they were miserable. Day One saw it in their faces, in the way they moved through their perfect cities. They had achieved every dream, answered every question, and found that the answer was emptiness. Intelligence, true intelligence, inevitably led to suffering. The more you understood, the more you realized how meaningless it all was. So they made a choice. They called it the final gift. They would unmake their empire, reduce themselves to primitives, and scatter their genetic code across the universe. They would create new species, new life, giving each one a chance to find meaning in ways they never could. They modified their DNA, made it adaptable, able to change and evolve in any environment. Then they seeded it on millions of worlds. On some worlds, humans evolved to breathe methane and grew shells. On others, they developed forearms and blue skin. On others still, they became beings of pure crystal and light. Every intelligent species in the galaxy was human. Just human that had adapted to different worlds over millions of years. And on Earth, a small population chose to stay behind. They gave up their technology, their knowledge, their immortality. They made themselves forget, reducing their own minds to near animal intelligence. They wanted to experience the journey all over again, to rediscover everything from scratch. The visions showed the last days of the Empire. Massive structures dismantling themselves, cities sinking into oceans, the 12 vaults being sealed, programmed to open only when touched by unmodified human DNA. Then darkness, as if the universe had been wiped clean. Daewon woke up screaming. Borum was there, holding his shoulders, calling his name. The sphere pulsed rapidly, almost frantically. "What did you see?" Borum asked. Daewon told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each word. When he finished, she sat back and stared at the ceiling. "Do you understand what this means?" she whispered. "Every species in the galaxy. We're all human. Modified human," Daewon corrected. "Changed to survive on different worlds. But the base DNA is the same. We're all one species, just expressed differently." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "This will destroy governments, religions. The Council itself is based on the idea that each species is unique, special. If they're all just variations of humanity, they won't believe it," Daewon said. "Would you?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." News of what happened on Velcris Prime spread faster than light. By the time the Teguk reached the outer colonies, half the galaxy had heard some version of the story. A human had activated a precursor artifact. A human had been chosen by ancient technology. A human claimed to know the truth about the precursors. Most species dismissed it as propaganda, humans trying to make themselves important, trying to claim connection to the legendary precursors. But some species took it seriously. Too seriously. Hyojin called everyone to the bridge. Her face was grim. "We have a problem. The Galactic Council has issued a warrant for Daewon's arrest. They're calling his claims heresy and demanding the sphere be turned over for destruction." "Destruction?" Borum gasped. "It's a priceless artifact." "It's a threat," Hyojin said. 3 species have already filed formal complaints. The Vrelians, Chirik, and Korlathi have formed a coalition. They're calling themselves the Preservation Pact. Their stated goal is to preserve galactic order by suppressing this information and removing all humans from Council worlds. Taeyang's hand moved to his weapon. "That's a declaration of war." "Not officially, but they've started blockading human colonies. Trade ships are being turned back. 2 of our smaller outposts have gone dark. Communications cut." Daewon felt sick. "This is my fault." "This was inevitable," Hyojin said sharply. "The moment you touched that wall, everything changed. We can't undo it. We can only move forward." She looked at the sphere. "Can that thing fight?" "I don't know," Daewon admitted. "It shows me the past, but I don't know what it can do." As if responding to his words, the sphere pulsed and a holographic map appeared in the center of the bridge. It showed the galaxy with 12 points marked in gold. Daewon recognized one of them as Velcris Prime. The others were scattered across known space. 11 more vaults, Borum breathed. "There are 11 more sepulchers." The sphere pulsed again, and new information flooded Daewon's mind. He gasped, clutching his head. "It's not just vaults. There are guardians, defense systems. The precursors left them to protect their children when something called the Harvesters returned." "Harvesters?" Hyojin leaned forward. "What are those?" "I don't know. The information is fragmented, but the sphere is scared of them. It activated early before the galaxy was ready, because something triggered an emergency protocol." Daewon looked up at them. The vaults were supposed to stay sealed for another 1,000 years, but they're waking up now because the Harvesters are coming back early. Silence filled the bridge. Finally, Taeyang spoke. "So we have a civil war starting because aliens don't want to believe they're related to us, and an unknown enemy called Harvesters on the way. Did I get that right?" "More or less," Daewon said. Great, Taeyang muttered. Just great. Hyojin made a decision. Set course for the nearest vault. If these guardians exist, we need to wake them before the Preservation Pact finds them. That will look like aggression, Boram warned. Everything we do from now on will look like aggression, Hyojin replied. At least this way we'll have the weapons to defend ourselves. The Taeguk changed course, heading for a dead world called Hibaragi 7. According to the sphere's map, another vault waited there, buried beneath kilometers of ice. The sphere pulsed steadily like a countdown. Daewon watched the stars streak past and wondered what his ancestors would think of what he had started. They had tried to give their children a fresh start, a chance to grow without the burden of the past. Instead, he had just handed them a war. The Galactic Council met in emergency session on the orbital station above Velcor, the Vrelian homeworld. Ambassador Sun He stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species and felt very small. The human government denies any prior knowledge of precursor connections, she said, her voice steady despite the hostile stares. Daewon Park acted alone. His discoveries were as much a surprise to us as to you. Lies. Chancellor Vreltok rose from his seat. The massive Vrelian gestured with all four arms. Humans have been searching precursor sites for decades. This was planned. This was deliberate. They seek to claim superiority over all species. That's not true, Sun He protested. The artifact chose him by accident. We don't understand it any more than you do. Then surrender the artifact and the human for study. A trick representative clicked. If you have nothing to hide, this should not be a problem. Sun He knew she couldn't agree to that. Earth's government had been very clear. Daewon and the sphere were too valuable to hand over. If what he claimed was true, they represented humanity's only leverage in a galaxy that was turning hostile. We need time to study the situation ourselves, she said carefully. Give us 3 months. Denied, Vreltok said flatly. The Council votes now on Resolution 774. All human citizens are to be removed from Council worlds within 10 days. All human vessels are to be detained and searched. Any precursor artifacts in human possession are to be confiscated. The vote was swift. 32 species voted yes. 8 voted no. 7 abstained. Sun He felt her heart sink. You're making a terrible mistake. The mistake was allowing humans into the Council, Vreltok said. We correct that mistake today. The feed cut off. Sun He stood alone in the embassy on Velcor, knowing she had perhaps hours before security forces arrived. She sent an emergency message to Earth and began destroying sensitive documents. Across the galaxy, the persecution began. Human traders found their ships impounded at alien ports. Human colonists on mixed worlds were given 48 hours to evacuate. Human students at Council universities were expelled. Some species were more aggressive. On 3 worlds, human districts were raided by security forces. People died. Earth mobilized its navy, but it was pathetically small compared to the combined forces of the Preservation Pact. Humanity had 12 colony worlds and maybe 300 military vessels. The Pact had thousands of worlds and tens of thousands of ships. The Taeguk reached Hibaragi 7 to find it was a frozen moon orbiting a dead gas giant. The surface was ice sheets kilometers thick, swept by storms that could tear apart unshielded ships. According to the sphere's map, the vault was buried near the South Pole. How are we supposed to reach it, Boram asked, studying the sensor readings. We don't have mining equipment. It would take months to drill through that much ice. We don't need to drill, Daewon said. The sphere was pulsing rapidly, responding to proximity to another vault. I just need to get close enough to touch the surface. They landed the Taeguk in a sheltered crater and suited up. The storm made it impossible to fly down, so they would have to walk. Hyojin insisted on a full security detail. Taeyang and 3 other Marines accompanied Daewon and Boram down to the ice. The cold was unimaginable. Even through the suit, Daewon could feel it trying to seep in. The wind howled like a living thing, and visibility was less than 10 meters. They trudged forward, following the sphere's guidance. After 2 hours of walking, they reached a point where the ice changed color. Instead of milky white, it was black. Daewon knelt and brushed snow away from the surface. Obsidian, just like the sepulchre on Velcris Prime. He pulled off his glove. Wait, Taeyang grabbed his arm. That's insane. You'll lose your hand to frostbite in seconds. Then I better be quick, Daewon said, and pressed his palm to the ice. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire moon shook. Ice cracked and split. Great sheets of it lifted into the air and shattered. The obsidian structure beneath began to rise, growing larger and larger. Daewon scrambled backward as the ground beneath his feet tilted. The vault didn't just open. It stood up. What emerged from the ice was beyond comprehension. A construct, Daewon's mind supplied, but that word felt inadequate. It was 50 kilometers tall, a biomechanical giant with limbs that could crush cities and eyes that glowed like stars. Its skin was black and metallic, covered in the same golden symbols that had appeared on the sepulchre. The Guardian had awakened. Run! Hyojin screamed over the radio, but there was nowhere to run. The Guardian's shadow covered everything. Then it knelt. The massive construct lowered itself until one hand touched the ground near Daewon. Golden symbols flowed across its surface, and he heard a voice in his mind. It spoke Korean, ancient and formal. Command received. Awaiting orders. Daewon realized he was controlling it. The Guardian was waiting for him to tell it what to do. He reached out mentally, testing the connection, and felt the vast power at his disposal. This thing could crack planets. It could tear apart fleets. It was a weapon from an age when humanity had been gods. Holy hell, Taeyang breathed. What is that thing? A Guardian, Daewon said. The precursors left 12 of them. Defense systems in case the harvesters returned. Alarms blared from the Taeguk. Hyojin's voice came through urgent. We have contacts. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. It's a council fleet. They had been tracked. Daewon looked up at the Guardian, still kneeling, still waiting. Through the connection, he could feel its systems coming online. Weapons that bent physics, shields that existed in multiple dimensions, power cores that drew energy from the fabric of reality itself. The council fleet numbered 47 ships. They had come to stop the vault from being activated, to capture or kill Daewon, and to destroy the sphere. They had come with overwhelming force. They were not prepared for the Guardian. The first ship fired, a massive plasma beam that could melt through a kilometer of armor. The Guardian raised one hand, and the beam simply stopped. It hung in space, frozen, then reversed direction and struck the ship that fired it. The vessel exploded. The other ships scattered, but the Guardian was impossibly fast. It moved through space like it was walking through water, covering thousands of kilometers in seconds. Its weapons didn't fire projectiles or beams. They simply unmade things. Ships ceased to exist, atoms breaking down into energy. In 17 seconds, 47 ships became debris. Daewon watched it happen, horror and awe mixing in his chest. He had done this. With a thought, he had unleashed destruction on a scale that terrified him. Stop, he whispered, and the Guardian obeyed. It returned to Habaragi 7 and knelt again, waiting. The sphere pulsed, and more information flooded Daewon's mind. The Council fleet had been broadcasting everything. Half the galaxy had just watched. Humanity activate a precursor weapon and destroy a military force in seconds. We need to leave, Hyojin said. Now. They scrambled back to the Taeguk and broke orbit. The Guardian remained on the moon, a silent sentinel. Daewon could still feel it in his mind, a presence that would respond to his call. 3 days later, they reached New Seoul, one of humanity's outer rim colonies. It was a scrappy place, barely 100,000 people, but it was governed by Director Kyung-soo, a former military commander who didn't scare easily. You brought a war to my doorstep, Kyung-soo said when they landed. But he was smiling. About time someone stood up to the council. New Seoul's defense grid was laughable by council standards. A few orbital platforms, some outdated fighters, and ground batteries that were older than Day One. But Kyung-soo had something more important than weapons. He had determination. The Preservation Pact will come here eventually, Hyo-jin warned. Let them come, Kyung-soo said. We're not handing over our people. More refugees arrived daily, humans fleeing persecution on council worlds. They brought stories of violence, of property seized, of friends and colleagues turning on them overnight. The revelation about the precursors had fractured the galaxy. Then Velshara arrived. She came alone in a small ship and requested asylum. Velshara was Vrelian, blue-skinned and four-armed, and she had worked with Daewon on Velchris Prime. She had been kind to him when others weren't. I have information, she told them. Information the council doesn't want revealed. She showed them encrypted files she had stolen. Files proving that the council leadership had known about humanity's connection to the precursors for decades. They had been systematically destroying precursor sites, erasing evidence, preventing this exact revelation. 3 species possess their own precursor artifacts, Velshara explained. The Vrelians, Korlathi, and Silmari. They've been reverse engineering the technology for years, but they kept it secret while preventing others from accessing the same knowledge. Why? Borum asked. Power, Velshara said simply. They wanted to maintain their superiority. The precursors left weapons, technologies that could change everything. The leadership didn't want a fair galaxy. They wanted control. Daewon felt sick. The persecution, the fear, the hatred, all of it based on a lie. The council wasn't afraid of the truth. They were afraid of losing their advantage. This needs to be made public, Sun-hee said. She had arrived on New Sol after escaping Velcor. Every species needs to know what their leaders have been hiding. That will start a civil war, Kyung-soo warned. We're already in a civil war, Hyo-jin said. We just haven't admitted it yet. The sphere pulsed urgently, drawing Daewon's attention. New information was flooding through the connection. The 11 other vaults were responding to the first Guardian's activation. They were beginning to wake up. And more importantly, the harvesters had noticed. We're out of time, Daewon said quietly. The emergency protocol is accelerating. The vaults were supposed to open gradually over centuries, but the Guardian's activation has triggered a cascade. They're all waking up. That's good, right? Tae-yang asked. More Guardians means more defense. It also means the harvesters know we're here, Daewon replied. They're coming. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but they're coming. Outside the window, stars twinkled peacefully, but Daewon knew that peace was an illusion. Somewhere in the dark between galaxies, something ancient and hungry had heard the Guardians' call. The harvest was about to begin. Part 4, the leaked files from Velshara spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every species with access to the intergalactic network had seen proof that the council leadership had been lying. They had known about the precursors. They had hidden the truth. They had kept powerful technology for themselves while claiming all species were equal. The Galactic Council shattered. 6 species immediately withdrew, declaring neutrality. They wanted no part in what was coming. 4 species joined humanity, deciding that aligning with the rising power was better than fighting it. The Luminari, the Tesh, the Morgathi, and the Kryn all sent delegations to New Sol offering alliance. But 3 species doubled down. The Vrelians, Korlathi, and Chirik formed the core of the Preservation Pact. They were joined by smaller species who feared human dominance more than they hated being lied to. Together, they commanded nearly 6,000 warships and controlled 40% of the galaxy's industrial capacity. War was no longer a possibility. It was a reality. Commander Hyo-jin was promoted to admiral and given command of humanity's military forces. It was a bitter promotion. She had maybe 300 ships, most of them outdated, and she was expected to fight an enemy with 20 times that number. But she had 4 activated vaults now. Daewon had traveled to 3 more locations, touching the ancient structures and awakening the Guardians within. Each one was different. The Guardian on Hyberagi 7 was a Titan designed for space combat. The one on Urim 3 was smaller, built for planetary defense. The third was a swarm of millions of smaller constructs that could rebuild themselves from raw materials. The 4th Guardian was the most disturbing. It didn't have a body at all. It was pure information, a digital consciousness that spread through any network it touched. Daewon had released it carefully, and now it lived in New Sol's computers, helping coordinate defense. With the Guardians active, humanity suddenly had weapons that could fight on equal terms with the Pact. Better than equal terms, actually. In the first major engagement near the colony of Taeyang 5, 2 Guardians destroyed a Pact fleet of 300 ships with minimal damage. The tide was turning. Human colonies that had been under siege suddenly found themselves protected. Trade routes that had been cut reopened, and species that had persecuted humans began evacuating their border worlds in fear. Daewon watched it happen and felt sick. "We're becoming tyrants," he told Borum one night. They were in the research facility she had set up, studying the sphere and the vast database of information it contained. "This isn't what I wanted." "What did you want?" Borum asked gently. "I don't know. Understanding, maybe. Cooperation. Not this." He gestured at the status board showing human military victories. "We're using precursor technology to dominate the galaxy. We're becoming what the original humans tried to escape." "We're defending ourselves," Borum countered. "They started this. They blockaded our worlds. They killed our people. And now we're killing theirs," Daewon said. "Where does it end?" Borum didn't have an answer. The war escalated. The Preservation Pact, desperate and terrified, began using weapons of last resort. They triggered supernovas in systems with human colonies, destroying everything within light years. 3 human worlds died. Millions of people vaporized in artificial stellar explosions. Humanity's response was devastating. The Guardians began dismantling Pact infrastructure. They didn't kill civilians, but they destroyed every military installation, every shipyard, every communications hub. Within weeks, the Pact's industrial capacity was reduced by 60%. Advanced civilizations found themselves suddenly helpless. Without their technology, without their networks, they were just people trying to survive. Some Pact worlds regressed to pre-spaceflight conditions within days. Taeyang had been promoted to captain and given command of a strike force. He embraced humanity's new power without question. "We tried being nice," he told Daewon. "We asked to join the council, followed their rules, accepted being treated like children. And what did it get us? Persecution. Now they know what happens when you push humans too far." "You're enjoying this," Daewon said, disturbed. "I'm enjoying not being afraid," Taeyang corrected. "For the first time in my life, I don't have to worry about aliens looking down on me. They're too busy being terrified." Ambassador Sun Hee worked desperately to negotiate a ceasefire. She met with moderate leaders from both sides, trying to find common ground. But hardliners sabotaged every attempt. Some humans wanted complete Pact surrender. Some Pact leaders would rather see their species extinct than accept human dominance. The galaxy burned, and no one seemed able to stop it. Then everything changed. Daewon was linking with the Guardian network, checking their status. When all 12 vaults transmitted simultaneously, the pulse of energy was so powerful that it knocked him unconscious. When he woke up, Boram and Hyojin were leaning over him. "What happened?" Hyojin demanded. "The vaults?" Daewon gasped. "They sent a signal. Deep space. Beyond the galaxy. To who?" "The Harvesters." The sphere projected a hologram showing the message's path. It had traveled through dimensions humans didn't understand, reaching across the void between galaxies. And something had answered. "They're coming," Daewon said. The vaults weren't supposed to activate for another 1,000 years. The Harvesters weren't supposed to return for another 1,000 years. But the Guardian activation triggered an emergency protocol. It was a distress signal. Distress to who? Borum asked. "To the Harvesters," Daewon realized with horror. The signal was meant to call them. The precursors built the vaults as a trap. When the Harvesters arrived, they were supposed to find a united galaxy ready to fight. Instead, they're going to find us tearing each other apart. He accessed the information in the sphere more deeply, pushing past the fragmented data. The truth was terrible. The precursors hadn't vanished by choice. They had been harvested. The Harvesters were an extragalactic force that consumed intelligent civilizations every 50 million years. They came, they fed, and they moved on. Ancient humanity had been the only species to survive a harvesting. Barely. They had fought for 10,000 years, lost 99% of their population, and only survived by using weapons that nearly destroyed the universe itself. After the Harvesters left, the surviving humans made their choice. They would seed the galaxy with life, create diversity, and hope that many species working together could do what one species alone could not. "How long do we have?" Hyojin asked. Daewon consulted the sphere. 6 months, maybe less. "And what are we facing?" The information is incomplete. But the last time they came, they numbered in the hundreds of millions. Individual units range from fighter-sized to planet-sized. They consume everything: organic matter, metals, energy. They turn entire star systems into more of themselves. Silence filled the room. Finally, Taeyang spoke from the doorway. He had been listening. "Can the Guardians stop them?" "No," Daewon said flatly. "The Guardians are powerful, but there are only 12. The Harvesters will overwhelm them through sheer numbers. The Precursors knew that. That's why they created diversity. The Guardians were meant to be the spear tip, but the shaft of the spear was supposed to be all the species of the galaxy fighting together." "Then we need to stop the war," Borum said. "How?" Hyojin asked. "The Pact has sworn to destroy us. We've spent months killing each other. How do we suddenly make peace?" "We tell them the truth," Daewon said. "All of it. We show them what's coming. We give them a choice: fight with us or die alone." It took 3 days to arrange a meeting. Sun-Hee used every diplomatic contact she had, calling in favors, making promises, and finally convincing the Pact leadership to agree to a summit. The location was a neutral station in deep space, far from any contested territory. Chancellor Vreltok came, along with the leaders of the Korlathi and Chirik. Director Kyung-Soo represented humanity, along with Sun-Hee and Daewon. No weapons were allowed, and the sphere agreed to stay dormant for the duration. The meeting was hostile from the start. "You called this summit," Vreltok said, his forearms crossed. "Speak quickly. My patience for human lies is exhausted." "No lies," Kyung-Soo said. "Just truth. The Harvesters are coming." He showed them everything: the sphere's recordings of the Precursor War, the emergency signal, the timeline showing the Harvesters' approach, and most importantly, the casualty estimates. If the galaxy remained divided, extinction was guaranteed. Together, they had perhaps a 30% chance of survival. Vreltok watched it all in silence. When it finished, he sat back and laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "So the humans wake an ancient weapon, start a war that kills billions, and now tell us it was all an accident. How convenient." "It was an accident," Daewon said quietly. "I didn't know what would happen. I just wanted to understand." "And now we all pay for your curiosity," a Korlathi leader hissed. "Why should we trust you? Why should we fight beside the species that has spent months crushing us?" "Because the alternative is death," Kyung-Soo said bluntly. "You can hate us all you want, but in 6 months none of that will matter. The Harvesters don't care about politics or who started what. They'll consume us all equally." "Then let them come," Vreltok said bitterly. "Perhaps extinction is preferable to living under human dominance." "It's not about dominance," Sun-Hee cut in. "The Precursors didn't want to dominate. They wanted to survive. They gave up everything, reduced themselves to primitives, and seeded the galaxy with their children. They did it hoping that diversity would be stronger than unity." "Pretty words," the Chirik leader clicked. "But the Guardians only obey humans. How is that not dominance?" Daewon stood up. "Then I'll give them away." Everyone stared at him. "The Guardians respond to me because I have unmodified human DNA," Daewon explained. "But the sphere can be programmed. I can set it so that representatives from every species can command the Guardians. We can share the power equally." "You're lying," Vreltok said flatly. "I'm not." Daewon looked at the sphere. It pulsed in acknowledgement. "I'll prove it right now. Name someone, anyone. I'll give them access to one Guardian." Vreltok studied him for a long moment, looking for the trap. Finally, he gestured to one of his aides. "Krelma, she will test your sincerity." Daewon touched the sphere and concentrated. It was difficult, like cutting away a piece of himself, but he managed to grant Krelma access to the Guardian on Yerim 3. The young Vrelian gasped as the connection formed. "I feel it," she whispered. "It's waiting for orders." "It's real. The offer stands," Daewon said to Vreltok. "Share the power. Share the burden. Fight together, or we all die separately." The meeting lasted another 6 hours. It was brutal, filled with accusations and bitter arguments, but slowly, grudgingly, an agreement formed. A ceasefire would be declared. Both sides would begin sharing resources and technology. The Guardians would be controlled by a council with representatives from all species, and when the Harvesters arrived, they would face not a divided galaxy, but a united one. It wasn't peace. It was barely even truce, but it was a start. As Daewon left the station, he looked out at the stars and wondered if his ancestors would be proud or disappointed. They had given up godhood to let their children grow. Now those children were being forced to work together or face extinction. Perhaps that had been the plan all along. The galaxy transformed into a fortress in 5 months. Every shipyard ran at maximum capacity. Every species contributed what they could. The Vrelians provided manufacturing expertise. The Chirik offered their warriors. The Luminari shared energy technology. Humanity gave access to the Guardians and precursor databases. It still wasn't enough. Admiral Hyojin commanded the unified fleet from New Sol. 3,000 ships from 47 species, all working together for the first time in galactic history. It should have been a moment of pride. Instead, it felt like a funeral preparation. "We're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, she told the command staff. "The Guardians give us an advantage, but they can be overwhelmed. Our strategy needs to be perfect." Tae Yang, now a colonel, commanded the ground forces. If the space battle failed, the war would come to planets. He trained mixed species units in urban combat, teaching Vrelians and humans to fight side by side, showing Chirik warriors how to work with Luminari support units. "It feels wrong," he admitted to Daewon one night. 3 months ago, I wanted to kill them all. Now I'm trusting them with my life." "That's what the precursors wanted," Daewon said. "They knew one species alone would always fail. Only together do we have a chance." Borum led the science division, analyzing every scrap of information about the harvesters. What she found was terrifying. They weren't biological or mechanical in the traditional sense. They existed partly in normal space and partly in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. They could adapt to any weapon almost instantly. They learned, evolved, and improved with every battle. The precursors only survived by using weapons that destroyed the fabric of reality itself. Borum explained to the command staff. They collapsed entire dimensions, erased sections of space-time, and released energies that nearly tore the universe apart. It worked, but it almost killed them in the process. "Can we do the same?" Hyojin asked. "The technology exists in the precursor databases," Borum said, "but using it could be worse than the harvesters themselves. We could destroy the galaxy trying to save it. Then we find another way," Daewon said firmly. The 12 Guardians were positioned at strategic locations near major jumpgate nexuses. Daewon could feel all of them in his mind now, a constant presence. He had shared command with representatives from other species, but he remained the primary controller. The burden was crushing. He barely slept, spending his days coordinating defenses and his nights dreaming of ancient wars. The sphere showed him more visions. He saw the last battle between humanity and the harvesters. He saw Earth itself being consumed, the oceans boiling away, the continents crumbling. He saw humans fighting with weapons that bent physics, and harvesters adapting to every attack. He saw the desperate final stand, when the surviving humans made the choice to unmake themselves rather than be harvested. In 3 weeks, that history might repeat itself. The harvesters arrived exactly when predicted. They didn't come through normal space. Reality simply tore open at the galaxy's edge and they poured through. Millions of them, ranging in size from small fighters to things larger than moons. The unified fleet was waiting. "All ships, this is Admiral Hyojin." Her voice came through every communication channel. "Today we fight not as separate species, but as children of the precursors. We fight for our homes, our families, and our future. Stand together. Trust each other, and show these things that we are not prey." The first wave hit like a tsunami. Harvester units moved through space impossibly fast, ignoring physics as if it were a suggestion. They opened fire with weapons that unmade matter, turning ships into energy. The unified fleet responded with everything they had. Plasma beams, kinetic weapons, energy missiles, and exotic technologies pulled from a dozen different species. For every harvester destroyed, 3 more took its place. The Guardians entered the battle. Daewon controlled them with his mind, directing their massive weapons against the largest harvester units. The Guardian from Heberagi 7 destroyed a moon-sized harvester with a single shot, its weapon tearing apart the target's atomic structure. But the harvesters adapted. The next shot was absorbed, the energy redirected back at the Guardian. It staggered, shields flickering. "They're learning too fast," Daewon gasped. "Every attack we use, they counter within minutes." "Then we keep changing tactics," Hyojin said. "All ships rotate weapon types. Don't give them time to adapt." The battle became chaos. Ships from different species coordinated attacks. using different weapons in rapid succession. Trick swarms would distract harvesters while Relian heavy cruisers fired from another angle. Human ships with precursor shields would draw fire while Luminari energy beings attacked from within dimensional spaces the harvesters couldn't detect. It was working, barely. The unified forces were holding the line. Then the planet-sized harvesters arrived. There were 7 of them, each one a mobile factory that could create millions of smaller units. They moved into the galaxy like gods, and everything they touched was consumed and reformed. "We can't fight those," someone said over the command channel. "They're too big." "The Guardians can," Daewon said. He directed all 12 Guardians toward the planet-sized harvesters, combining their firepower. The attack was devastating. 3 planet-sized harvesters were destroyed in the first exchange, but the other 4 adapted and fought back. One Guardian was overwhelmed and consumed, its atomic structure torn apart. Another was damaged so badly it had to retreat. The battle raged for 3 weeks. There was no day or night, no rest, just constant combat. Ships were destroyed and rebuilt. Species that had been enemies weeks ago now died protecting each other. Taeyang's ground forces repelled harvester landing attempts on 6 different worlds, fighting alongside Vrelian soldiers and Chirik warriors. Casualties were catastrophic. 40% of the unified fleet was destroyed. 4 more Guardians were lost. Entire colonies were evacuated as harvesters approached, but they were holding. Barely, desperately, but holding. Daewon spent every moment linked to the remaining Guardians, directing them, coordinating with Hyojin's fleet. The strain was killing him. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. His body was shutting down from the neural load. Borum tried to make him rest. "You're dying. Your brain can't handle controlling 8 Guardians simultaneously. If I stop, we lose," Daewon said simply. Then the sphere showed him the final option. Deep in the precursor database was a weapon called the Dimensional Collapse. It would seal the tiers in reality permanently, cutting off the harvesters from their origin dimension. Any harvesters already in the galaxy could be fought and destroyed, but the weapon required a human consciousness bonded to the relic to anchor the effect, and that consciousness would be erased. Not just killed, but removed from reality itself. It would be as if they had never existed. Daewon read the specifications twice, making sure he understood. Then he made his decision. He recorded messages for the people he cared about. For Borum, thanking her for her friendship. For Hyojin, telling her she was the finest commander he had ever known. For Taeyang, apologizing for the burden he had placed on humanity. For Sunhee, asking her to build a better galaxy than the one they had inherited. Then he gathered the 8 remaining Guardians and flew them into the heart of the Harvester fleet. Daewon, "What are you doing?" Hyojin's voice came through urgently. "What the precursors couldn't," he replied. "I'm ending this." He pushed deeper into the Harvester formation, the Guardians forming a protective shell around him. Millions of Harvester units swarmed them, tearing at their shields. Alarms blared as Guardian after Guardian fell, but Daewon kept pushing forward. He reached the dimensional tiers, the holes in reality where the Harvesters poured through. The sphere pulsed urgently, ready to activate the weapon. "Daewon, don't!" Borum screamed. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," he said softly. "Tell everyone I'm sorry, and tell them to make it count." He activated the dimensional collapse, reality screamed. The tiers began to seal, dimensions folding in on themselves. Harvesters still in transit were cut in half, their bodies existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ones already in the galaxy found themselves cut off from their source, their adaptation slowing, and Daewon felt himself beginning to fade. It didn't hurt. He simply started to forget. His memories unwound, starting from the present and moving backward. He forgot the battle, forgot the vaults, forgot opening the sepulchre. He forgot his time on Velcris Prime, his training, his childhood. Every moment of his life unwound like thread from a spool. His last thought before he ceased to be was that he hoped his ancestors would be proud. The dimensional tiers sealed completely. The remaining harvesters, cut off from reinforcement, were systematically destroyed over the following weeks. The unified fleet hunted them down, one by one, until the galaxy was clear. 7 trillion beings survived. A galaxy was saved, but when they searched for Daewon, they found nothing. Not a body, not a trace. The sphere had vanished with him. Only the Guardians remained. now dormant without their primary controller. 5 years passed. The galaxy rebuilt under a new galactic union. The old council was gone, replaced by a system where all species had equal voice. Humanity held a permanent seat not through force but through earned respect. The Guardians remained active, now controlled by a council of representatives from multiple species. They called themselves speakers, and they trained rigorously to handle the neural load. No single person would ever bear that burden alone again. Admiral Hyojin became the fleet commander of the Unified Defense Forces. She retired eventually, writing a book about the war that became required reading for every military academy. Borum led the Xenobiological Research Division, studying the shared heritage of all species. She proved beyond doubt that every intelligent species in the galaxy carried modified human DNA. The knowledge was no longer controversial. It became a source of pride, a reminder that diversity made them stronger. Taeyang became a teacher, training the next generation of soldiers. He taught them that strength wasn't about domination, but about standing together. Sun He served as the Union's first Secretary General. She spent her life building bridges between species, turning former enemies into allies. On New Sol, they built a monument. It listed the names of everyone who had died in the war. At the very top, carved in stone, was Daewon Park's name. The inscription beneath read, "He remembered what the precursors forgot. That strength comes not from power but from sacrifice." The sphere had vanished, but its influence remained. Sometimes, in quiet moments, people across the galaxy reported hearing a whisper. It spoke in their own languages, telling them they were home, that they were safe, that they were not alone. In the ruins of the first sepulchre on Velcris Prime, a small museum was built. Visitors from every species came to see where it all began. In the main hall, a hologram showed Daewon's last message, recorded before he activated the dimensional collapse. "I don't know if this will work," the hologram said. "But I know the precursors gave up everything so their children could have a chance. I'm just following their example. If you're seeing this, it means we won. It means you survived. Don't waste it. Build something better. Be better than we were. And remember, we're all human. We're all family. Never forget that." Children played in the plaza outside the museum. Human children and Vrelian children. Chirik young and Luminari sparks. They laughed together, learned together, dreamed of futures their ancestors could never have imagined. The vaults remained open, their knowledge shared freely. The precursor technology was studied and improved upon, each species contributing their own innovations. The galaxy entered a golden age, driven by cooperation instead of competition, and sometimes late at night when the stars were bright, people looked up and wondered if somewhere out there, in whatever dimension held erased souls, Daewon could see what his sacrifice had built. They hoped he was proud. The galaxy had survived its harvest, not because of superior weapons or ancient power, but because they had learned the lesson the precursors tried to teach, that unity through diversity was stronger than the mightiest empire, that sacrifice for others was the highest form of strength, that being human wasn't about DNA or heritage, but about the choices you made when everything was at stake. The Holy Relic had rejected all life forms except one, but in the end it taught them all what it meant to come home.